And I think the biggest burden I felt is that you are morally responsible for creating humans who are not sociopaths. And that's really scary. And I think no one talks about, like the newborn days. Yeah, the newborn days are hard. They're hard for everybody. There's no one that got out of the newborn days alive. And if they say they did, then they're lying, or they had a night nurse the entire time. But no one talks about that 5-year-old that's going to come to you and say, like, why did grandma die? And can we talk about that?
Today I'm chatting with Olivia Howell about parenting with a partner that had a completely different upbringing than her, embracing a mom support system that exists mostly online, and how she navigates technology in her home. The dreaded screen time decision. Olivia is a New Yorker who is married to a non-New Yorker and has 2 boys aged 5.5 and 2.5. She's a social media manager who works from home, and so we chat about the challenges that brings both from inside the house and outside. Welcome to the This Is Parenting podcast, a show devoted to sharing the roller coaster journey of parenthood from moms and dads all over the world. I'm your host, Andrea Rhodes. Information and show notes about today's episode can be found at thisisparentingpodcast.com. Let's get started. All right, Olivia. Hey, let's start this conversation off by telling me a little bit about you and your family, your kids, and where you live. Just a little bit about you.
Cool. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really excited. So I am a New Yorker. I'm born and bred on Long Island, and I'm a social media manager, but I was a Latin teacher for 10 years before becoming a social media manager, which I can talk about a little bit later. I have 2 sons. So Weston is 5.5 and Wyatt is 2.5, so 2 boys. I'm married to Eric, and he is from North Carolina and Chicago, and then came to Connecticut for work, and we met online. So he's not a New Yorker at all, which is interesting, parenting with someone very different background with you. And we have a pretty, I would say, quiet life. I mean, I like to be home. I'm a pretty quiet, I'm like a very introverted extrovert. So I love everything online. Everything, my whole world is social media online. All my best friends are online. Literally met my husband online. But I like to, I don't know, I'm just kind of a homebody. My husband's not so much of a homebody. He has a full-time job, but he's also a musician. So he plays music a lot. He's in different bands in New York City. So he does a lot of music on weekends, and a lot of nights he's rehearsing. So he does the reverse New York City commute. So he works on Long Island, and then he'll go into the city and then come back late at night. He hustles for the music. He really does. But that leads me home with the kids a lot. So we always try to find interesting things to do. My family's here, so we see them a lot. My mom and my stepdad, my dad, my sister, very close to my sister. She's kind of like, in a lot of ways, was like a mom. I was teaching for 10 years and went back to work when Weston was born, and my parents, my sister, watched him for the whole year that I went back to teaching. So they're very close. And then when I left teaching, I obviously took my own child back. I've had the experience of both, working outside the home and working inside the home. And I grew my own company to, now I have somebody that works with me, and it's a lot of work because I'm full-time stay-at-home mom, also full-time work-at-home mom. And I don't have the hours for that. So it's an interesting balance. People often ask me how I do it, and I don't sleep much.
So I heard a lot in there that I definitely want to dive into. Let's start with, you mentioned that you and your husband have different backgrounds. Talk about that a little bit.
I think, well, it's funny. We come from very different backgrounds, but very similar in a lot of ways too. So my parents got divorced when I was 10. His parents have been married for 35 years. Very different, in that dynamic. My parents have both been with different people over the years, and his parents have been completely committed to each other. So that's coming into a marriage, I think, after watching your parents go through a divorce is a whole other topic for a podcast. It's hard, and I'm the oldest child in my family. I took a lot of responsibility during the divorce, even though I was 10. So I kind of came into marriage a little jaded in that way. he grew up, in North Carolina is really different from where he grew up than Long Island. Very different type of people, very different approach to kind of everything. In a lot of ways, it's funny. Like I tell people, I'm a very anxious person and he's very anxious, but we have completely different anxieties. So we have pretty much never had the same worries about the same things. And so our big life fears or our big life goals also happen to be very different. And so it's just interesting. But in a lot of ways, like he grew up in a very close-knit family. He has 2 sisters. My family is very close-knit. So we did both come to the table with a lot of the same values. But I think location-wise, it's just, it's hard. He doesn't have family. His family's not here. My family is here. So it's just in terms of like, who's around more. And, he does, like, I feel like in a lot of ways I parent alongside my parents and he doesn't have that experience. And it's sad for me that he doesn't necessarily have that experience. He's very, very close to his parents. They talk all the time. And I talk to his parents all the time. We try to FaceTime and everything, but it's obviously not the same. But it's just, we came from different like socioeconomic backgrounds. I grew up in the North Shore of Long Island, which if anybody knows, it's known for its Great Gatsby style life. I was not part of that life, but the people around me were. So I did see that. He came from Hickory, North Carolina, very different background. So it's been interesting kind of navigating that. He doesn't really like the New York lifestyle, and I'm very much a New Yorker, but he must love me enough to stay here. So, so that's been interesting. And just, it's something you obviously don't think about. Like when you meet somebody and you get married, you're like, how is this going to affect our future children? But he's an amazing father, and he brings so much of his background, and our shared parenting values to the table. So it's been really great, and music plays a huge part of our life from him. So we actually have a studio in the house, and his music is really the backbone for everything the family does, I have to say. So, even just today, like we look at our calendar months in advance to see what shows he's going to be playing so we can plan our family vacations around that. So he gets that. My father-in-law is also amazing. My father-in-law actually builds instruments. He's a luthier. It's really been fascinating to be part of that and watch that whole process. And I feel really lucky that I love my in-laws. They're both amazing artists. Both of them were art teachers. And so, and it's funny, and my in-laws are both art teachers, and my mother-in-law was a math teacher for a long time, but they are amazing teachers. My mother-in-law just retired, and my mother is an artist and my stepfather is a sculptor. So we were both very much raised in a very artistic houses. And also I think the belief, we both came from families that let us pursue our creative endeavors no matter what they were. So he started playing music when he was 13, and he's an amazing acoustic musician, and he was doing all sorts of stuff out of the gate. And in my house, it was like, what do you need to create? Can I get you anything? Like there was constantly creations being made. So I think when it comes to parenting our kids, we're very much on the same page as let them be as creative as they want, let them use their imagination, maybe in a different way than people who weren't brought up by artists would have been. I don't know what anybody else's house is like, but everything here is like a show, like a theatrical production. So I don't know.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, it sounds like you kind of blended the values that you both brought to the table, and then you're really focused on the creativity in your house.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think about it because it's so ingrained in our life. But when talking to you and when I think about our day-to-day life, so much of it is about the creativity. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned how you really live online. You love the online space, and that's where you spend a lot of your time. How have you thought about that world as it relates to your kids and how they are being brought up in such a tech forward time in life right now? Have you kind of thought about how you're going to broach that topic with your kids? Because your oldest is getting right there to a point where it's starting to become a thing.
That's a great question. We are a very pro-screen household. And I don't know if it's just my children's personalities or if it's the way we approached it, but they tend to self-regulate pretty well. So they watch me. I'm pretty much on my phone all day working. I mean, not if my mother-in-law is listening, I'm not really on my phone all day working, but I mean, I, I have my phone there because we're dealing with clients all day. I'm not in front of my laptop as much when I'm with the kids, but they have watched me, build a whole company through online stuff. And my husband does a lot of online stuff, in terms of music and with YouTube and stuff like that. So they each have their own iPads. And I would say that it is interesting to watch. And I do try to take a step back sometimes and watch it from an outsider's point of view. So they'll binge on the iPad sometimes, for let's say 2 days. It's like constant, just like needing to have their iPad. And then they'll put it away for like a week and a half and they won't have any interest in it. And I think it helps. Like I try to keep some art supplies out. We have a lot of books out. They are really into especially my oldest, who the oldest sets the tone, right, for the whole house. He's really into costumes and theatrical stuff. So I think, it's hard. That question to me, it's going to be interesting because they are going to be raised in this generation that everybody is in front of their screen. We're not a video game family. I can say that. So my husband probably has never played a video game. I played The Sims back in the day, which I loved. I wasn't raised in a video game household. I can't foresee my kids really being into video games. I would love for them to understand computers and technology. I've actually sat down with my oldest and showed him how to do stuff on Photoshop because to me, that's where life is going. And so you do need to know that to a degree. That being said, if you asked my oldest one, would you take a computer class or acting class, he would always choose, the creative thing. What's really interesting to me and kind of is answering the question is I'm also a freelance writer. So I do write about my children a lot. And that is something that's come up a lot in the writers groups that I'm in about how to address that and talk about your children. Or not even that, but I also do a lot of product reviews. And I've stopped doing so much with them because they have no interest in sitting and reviewing a product. Also, I have to say there's been some products that I would be testing for the first time, and I'm uncomfortable using my children as guinea pigs, for things like car seats. Like I'm not, if it's the first time on the market, I don't want to be that person to test that. So it's interesting. Like a great example of this is one of my best friends I met through Instagram, and she's actually coming to visit with her son. And so it is really cool, I think, for them to see like people from the internet are coming, because they don't really realize that my husband and I met online. Like that doesn't mean anything to them, but that they understand like that, mommy's friend is coming and they met on whatever, as much as they can understand it. But screens and do play a huge part of our life. And I think that that's fine. There's a place for it, and also it's like the interaction. So they're never just sitting there doing nothing. Right. And that's very much my personality. Like I'm always doing 100 things at once. So, I'm always in the same room with them, talking to them, even if they're playing their games. They're telling me what they're doing and we're talking and we're watching TV. It's the same thing. There's always interaction happening, even with the screens out. And I think that's a huge component of it for families as well.
Tell me something that you feel is a challenge in your parenting life right now.
Sleep. Sleep is really hard. My kids have never slept through the night, ever, not once. And my 5.5-year-old had been sleeping through the night and now is going through like a nightmare phase.
Oh, the nightmare phase is for real.
Yeah, and it's like every night it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, his sleep cycle something must kick in and he just kind of wakes up. And so it's really hard. I get really jealous of other families because we can't do things like we've never gone away alone for the night, my husband and I, because it's like impossible. What am I supposed to have somebody here that's going to wake up 6 times with the kids? Like I'd feel bad asking even my own parents to do that. So I think like I haven't had a full night's sleep in, I don't know, 6 years. So I think that's a huge struggle because it really plays into everything else in our family. Like I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I get frustrated with them. Like I don't handle the nightmares well because I'm tired. I want to go back to sleep, and so I am very much a believer that you do need to, like, as they say, parent through the night too. So I never did any cried out or anything like that with my children. And my oldest did co-sleep with us for a long time, but they're just not kids that stay asleep. And that's one of like my platforms, is to remind other parents that other parents might not be telling the truth and that their kids might not be sleeping too, but it's like a very trendy to say your kids sleep through the night. So I think my life would be like so different if I could get like 7 hours of sleep.
Well, then on the flip side
yes.
of that, is there something that's going really well?
That's a good question. I think my husband and I are both really good at, let me put it this way. My oldest son is really eccentric. He's one of those very old soul kids that he loves history and mythology, and he could talk about mythology, or right now it's like fairy tales. We're like, but it's not just like fairy tales. He wants to know like the history of them and the Brothers Grimm and all that stuff. And I think we're really good at like whatever path he wants to go down, we follow him down that path. I once actually had one of my students back in the day he's an amazing musician. Like now he's like a Juilliard. He's like a totally amazing kid. And he had some brothers, and each brother had a completely different interest. And I remember asking the mom, how did you raise these amazing sons? And she said to me, whatever their interest is, you go with them. And so if they change their mind, that's okay. Go to the new interest with them. Like, don't push them into doing something because it's for you. But, if they want to learn about elephants, whatever it is. So I think we're really good. Like my little one's obsessed with firemen, and like, but to the point where it's like pathologically obsessed with firemen. And like he lives in his fireman clothes like day to day. So, I'm not fighting with him about it. I'll wash the pants. It's not a big deal, and so I think like letting them have the space to be their own people is really important for me. And I feel like, I'm really good at that, letting them be their own people, because I want to be friends with them and I want them to be interesting people. I don't want them to just be like blah because of me. So I think we're really good at giving them their own space to figure out who they are.
What is something unique about your parenting journey?
I think the fact that I work from home is very unique, and I think it's not really understood. So, like those memes that are like the different pictures and it says like what the world thinks of you, what your mother thinks of you. That's kind of what I feel like with working from home. So, other stay-at-home moms or other moms, because I drop my son off at kindergarten, I pick him up because I work from home. And the other parents don't understand, like, okay, but between the hours of 10 and 1, I'm working. I have a sitter here for my little one. So like I'll be invited to brunches, or I'll be asked, oh, can you come to the classroom? I can't always come to the classroom for things because I have phone calls and I run a business. So I think that's been something difficult for me to navigate, but also really beautiful in its own way, because it also means that I'm here for every single sick day and, field trip and whatever. Like even if they're playing on their iPad and I'm in the same room with them and I'm working, we're together. So I think that's been really unique because it's allowed for me to be the total hands-on mom that I wanted to be, but also run a business, which I love. And I didn't realize how much I love until I did it.
Has it been a challenge communicating what you do with the other parents, or is it a challenge setting boundaries with your family?
I think it's all a challenge. Even my own mom, who loves me unconditionally, has no idea how much I actually work. And so I think people, generally speaking, when you work from your house, people don't understand that you are working. And so I think especially when you work online or in a social media thing, people are like, oh, you're posting to Facebook. That's quick, right? Like that, whatever. But, I have, 3 or 4 clients at a time, and they require phone calls, and I do consults, and I do influencer management now, which requires a lot of phone calls. So, like, for example, when I hired a sitter to come about 10 hours a week for my son my little one, when he was born, I think it was really confusing to people why I would need a sitter because I'm home, right? But like I couldn't take care of a newborn baby while I was trying to have a phone call or a conference call. Like one of my clients last year was a major television network. I really don't think that they would have appreciated a screaming baby on the phone. So I think that's been interesting in terms of, I think people just don't understand. And also, boundaries are hard. I'm pretty good about setting the boundaries, I think, but I think people get offended because they think that you're home when you're really like not home.
So they feel like you're not carving out time for them.
Yeah. And I also and this sounds really odd, I guess, but like I have a great group of mom friends and girlfriends, and I have some local friends too, but most of them are online. And these are women that I've known for now 5-6 years, and we talk all day long. And so I'm not always looking for new friends. And I think it can be tricky, with other moms because they're like, want to, see you all the time or hang out with you all the time. And it's like, I have, these people, they might not be here, but like my best friend and I joke, we call each other our pocket best friends. Cause like she's in my pocket all day. If I need her, I'll just text her, So
you're getting the support you need. It just happens to be virtually.
Yes. And it doesn't surprise me about my life. I mean, I was an early AOL chat room person back in the day, when I was 14, 15. So everything in my life has been online, and I am an amazing online friend. I will be so devoted to you. I'm not great in person. I'm very much a homebody. I don't like to leave my kids. It's hard, between my husband's schedule and my stuff and work. And I would much rather sit at home and listen to a podcast and work, So like even my local friends who are 5 minutes away, we never see each other because it's hard with kids, but we'll text all the time. So I think that's such a good way to put it. I love my girlfriends and I feel so supported, and we check in with each other like all day long with video chats and texts and on literally every social platform you can think of. I'm talking to people all day, but I'm not physically there, but I am emotionally there. And I feel that from my friends too. So I don't know. I think that's going to be interesting to go back to what you said before to see how that plays out in my kids' lives too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway, though, is that you found your tribe and your support system where it made sense for you, and that's working for you. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter that it's not the traditional in-person type of group. You figured it out and how it works for you.
No, I love that you said that because you do start to feel crazy sometimes, like who are these people, that have come into my life? But I think it also lends itself to being a much more honest relationship because you're typing a lot of it. Yeah. So, and I FaceTime my friends and we talk on the phone too, but no one has time with kids to sit and chat on the phone for hours, but to text your friend and be like, oh my God, what a day, whatever. And just have somebody that's listening to you, is really special, I think.
What would you wish that there was less of in parenting culture today?
That is a great question. I think this whole deceiving concept that anything is easy. Parenting is really hard, and it's so layered. So you have your marriage, you have your own parents, you have your own siblings, you have all these other people in your life, and on top of that, you're also supposed to be a parent. And I think the biggest burden I felt is that you are morally responsible for creating humans who are not sociopaths. And that's really scary. And I think no one talks about, like the newborn days. Yeah, the newborn days are hard. They're hard for everybody. There's no one that got out of the newborn days alive. And if they say they did, then they're lying, or they had a night nurse the entire time. But no one talks about that 5-year-old that's going to come to you and say why did grandma die? And can we talk about that? And or like my son the other night who told me he saw a ghost in his room. And I'm like, okay, well, how do we proceed with that? That's not in the parenting manuals, or the hard stuff. Like when and I would say this has probably been the hardest too, and this is not answering your question, but I'll just bring it up anyway, is that no one talks about, really no one talks about how to grieve in your own way when you're a parent. So when you are going through a devastating loss in your life, how do you get up and give goldfish to the kids and not want to just lie in bed all day? And I think that that's a really difficult thing that no one talks about. And so I think that really what I wish kind of people did more was talk about how hard it is. And it's okay that it's hard. Right. You're raising human beings, and you can love every minute and hate every minute, and I think that that's acceptable, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that you want to kill your kids sometimes because they keep asking the same question over and over, or because you want to just like have a nice night with your husband and then the kids threw up and you're like, great, now I have to cancel. So like little stuff like that. I think, with my girlfriends, we definitely talk about it and we're very honest, but overall there's like a certain rose colored glasses, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I totally agree with you. And I wonder if that is because online it seems more public, and so you subconsciously don't want to feel ungrateful for this journey by shitting on it and talking about how terrible it is. And so I wonder if that plays a part of it, because I do think it's some people who are just putting on a facade and putting on a show, and they want people to think they're okay. And then I think there's others that aren't intentionally trying to do that, but just don't want to seem that they don't appreciate the gifts that they've been given in their children. And so I think, you do have to kind of walk that fine line and find a little bit of balance there. And I'm hoping shows like this and other channels are kind of illustrating parenting a little bit better. There's a show on Netflix, and it's not new, but it's new to Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it. Working Mom.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
So my husband and I are maybe like 4 or 5 episodes into season 1, and it is so real that it kind of hurts.
Yeah.
I can see myself in a lot of the different situations with a lot of the different moms. And then I can see my friends and my family who have had similar journeys as some of these other moms in the show. And my husband will like watch me as I'm watching the show, and like sometimes I cringe or I have like a visceral reaction to something, and he asks me about it because he doesn't have that same reaction that I do. And so then I kind of tell him why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling and how this hit me emotionally. And that's been a really interesting discussion to have with him. So I do think that there are more projects and more creative content out there that is starting to talk about the realness of it. But it's hard to, it's really hard to admit that it's hard, to share that it's hard and not seem ungrateful. And it's an emotional thing to put that out there.
Absolutely. And I think it's so nuanced too, right? So everybody's journey is so different. But at the same time, there's certain things that we're all doing that's exhausting to all of us. Yep. Like I was thinking about that this morning as I was taking my little one in the bitter cold to drop my older one off at kindergarten. It's like by the time I get back to the car and the screaming toddler's in the car seat, I'm like ready to collapse for the day. And I'm thinking there's so many moms out there doing the same exact thing I'm doing, and like how this really long, exhausting moment sets the tone for your entire day, or like no one tells you what it's like to wake up every morning to a toddler screaming in your face. Little things like, and I'm very honest with people about my parenting journey, but I definitely do it with a sense of humor. Because I don't want to scare anybody, and I love my friends and I want them to have children. But, it's the little things that, you could look at, and at the end of the day, you sit there and I'm like, oh my God, I got through that.
Well, Olivia, thank you so much for stopping by. I want you to kind of share with the audience a little bit more about where they can find you if they want to follow you and get to know you a little bit and share away.
Well, thank you so much. It's like such a joy. I'm really honored to be on your podcast. I love your questions that you ask people. I was obsessed with your question you asked Ruthie about bedtime. I thought that was so smart because it's like such a nuanced thing for each household. I am over on Instagram. I'm Olivia M. Howell, and my business is Howell Media House. You can find me online there, and I'm on Instagram a lot. I overstory most days, so usually about parenting or work stuff. But thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Olivia Howell for joining me today. I've linked her social profiles in the show notes, as well as the link for that show I mentioned on Netflix called Workin' Moms. It's a really, really good show, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. And have you left a rating or review for this show yet? I know it's a pain in the ass, but it really helps to get this little tiny show out there to more moms and dads, so I would be grateful if you took a minute to click those stars and leave a review. Thanks.
Thanks for listening.